In question 1, we're told a sequence is defined by the recurrence relation u sub n plus 1 is equal to the square root of u sub n over 2 plus a over u sub n equal to 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth, where a is a constant. In part A, it says given that a is equal to 20 and u sub 1 is equal to 3, find the values of u sub 2, u sub 3, and u sub 4, giving your answers to 2 decimal places. The question carries 3 marks. This is a practice paper and this is a calculator question. In the real exam, you won't get a calculator question. It will simply be an easier recurrence relation to deal with. So what we're going to do is sub the values in and include the question for completeness. So if we let n be equal to 1, on the left hand side we'll have now u sub 2, and that will be equal to the square root of u sub 1 over 2 plus a, which we now know to be 20, over u sub 1. So if we write this out, u sub 2 will be equal to the square root of u sub 1, which we know is 3, over 2 plus 20 over 3. At this stage, I'm going to use a calculator and set up what we call an iterative formula, or if you like, a recurrence relation. So what I'm going to do is put in here 3. If I put in here 3, setting up my formula, I'm going to put in the answer, I'm going to divide that by 2, then I'm going to put plus 20 over my answer. The advantage of this technique is that it's going to take the answer that I get for u sub 2 and feed it in for u sub 3. So u sub 2 is 7 root 6 over 6, which is 2.86 to 2 decimal places. So u sub 2 is going to be 2.86, and that's 2 dp. At this stage, I'm simply going to hit enter. The reason I'm going to do that is because it's going to take this value in and it's going to generate u sub 3. 2.90 correct to 2 decimal places. So u3 will be equal to 2.90, and that is to 2 decimal places. If I do that again, I'm now going to generate the next term because I've just subbed in the last one, and that's 2.888 and so on and so forth. So we're going to have u sub 4, and that's going to be 2.89, and that now is correct to 2 decimal places. So as stated, that question won't come up. I've included it for completeness. In part B, it says, given instead that u sub 1 is equal to u sub 2, which is equal to 3. In the first part, calculate the value of a for 3 marks, and in part 2, write down the value of u5 for 1 mark. So let's go ahead and write this out. So what we're going to have then is the following. We've got u1, which is equal to u2, which is equal to 3. So what I'm going to do now is let n be equal to 1. If n is equal to 1, we're going to come back to this point right here. So we can see that we're going to have u2, which will be equal to the square root of u1 over 2 plus now a over u1. So u2 is 3, and that's going to be equal to the square root of u1, which is also 3, over 2 plus a over u1, which is going to be 3. I'm now going to square both sides of this equation and solve a. So that will give me 9 is equal to 3 over 2 plus a over 3. If I subtract 3 over 2 from both sides, that will now give me 15 over 2 will be equal to a over 3. Multiplying both sides of the equation by 3, we can see that 45 over 2 is equal to a, or if you like, 22.5. 3 marks in total. In part 2, it says write down the value of u sub 5 for 1 mark. Now if we look at this, u sub 1 is going to be equal to u sub 2, which will be equal to u sub 3, which will be equal to u sub 4, and so on and so forth. So for the 1 mark, we should just simply be able to write down that u sub 5 will be equal to 3. And that is why it's a write down question for only 1 mark. We should spot now that this sequence is going to generate 3 each time. So total now of 7 marks on this particular question, and as stated in a real exam, this one would not appear. You can of course do that manually. I just think it's easier to use the calculator and the recurrence relation.